Your dog lunges at a stranger on the street, teeth showing, growling low. And your first thought is, this dog is dangerous, maybe aggressive, maybe dominant. Your trainer used that word too, dominant, and suddenly you are dealing with a completely different problem than the one you actually have. Because here's the sharp truth. Most dogs labeled aggressive are not aggressive at all. They're terrified. And when you treat fear like it is dominance, you do not just fail to fix the behavior, you make it dramatically worse. That changes everything about your approach. There's a moment most dog owners know. You're out on a walk, or a guest walks through your front door, and your dog just snaps. Maybe it is a lunge. Maybe it is a growl that comes out of nowhere. And your stomach drops. Because suddenly the animal you love feels like a stranger. You start Googling. You ask your neighbor who has a dog. You call a trainer. And somewhere in that process, someone uses the word aggressive. And once that word gets attached to your dog, it is like a fog settles in. You start seeing everything through that lens. Every growl confirms it. Every lunge feels like proof. But what if the label was wrong from the start? What if you've been solving the wrong problem this entire time? That's exactly what this video is about. We're going to break down the real difference between fear and aggression in dogs. Not just theoretically, but in a way that changes how you see your dog's behavior in real time. You're going to understand why fear-based behavior gets misread constantly, what's actually happening inside your dog's nervous system when they react, and what you need to do differently if fear is the real driver. Because the fix for a fearful dog and the fix for a truly aggressive dog are not the same. And confusing the two doesn't just waste your time, it can genuinely damage your dog's emotional state and your relationship with them. Let us start with the most important distinction nobody talks about clearly enough. Aggression and fear are not the same emotion wearing the same costume. They can look identical from the outside, the barking, the lunging, the snapping, but the internal experience driving those behaviors is completely different. And that internal experience is what determines your entire training approach. True aggression is goal-directed. A truly aggressive dog is moving toward the threat, controlling the interaction, escalating intentionally. The body language is forward, weight over the front paws, direct hard eye contact, a stiff tail that's often raised. There's a kind of confidence to it, almost predatory. These dogs are relatively rare, and when genuine aggression exists, it usually has a specific context: resource guarding, predatory drift, or in some cases, neurological issues. Fear-based reactivity looks aggressive, but the motivation is entirely opposite. The dog isn't trying to dominate the situation. They're trying to make a scary thing go away. The aggression, if you want to call it that, is defensive. It's a dog saying, "I am terrified and I need you to back off right now." Every lunge, every snap, every explosive bark is a desperate bid to create distance between themselves and whatever is frightening them. Here's the thing, and this is where owners get turned around. Fear responses can be incredibly intense. They can look like the most aggressive thing you've ever seen. Because fear activates the same fight-or-flight system that drives genuine aggression. The difference is the motivation underneath it. So how do you actually tell the difference? You stop looking at the reaction and start looking at what came before it. And you pay very close attention to the body language in the moments leading up to the outburst. A fearful dog will almost always show warning signals before the explosion. These are easy to miss if you do not know what you are looking for. The yawn that comes out of nowhere. The sudden lip lick when nothing edible is nearby. The whale eye, where the white of the eye becomes visible because your dog is turning their head away from something while keeping their gaze on it. The low body posture, the tucked tail, the ears pulled back flat against the head. These aren't random nervous tics. These are your dog trying to communicate distress through the only language they have. And here's where the tragedy happens. When owners do not recognize those signals, the dog's early communication gets ignored. The warning is missed. So the dog escalates to the next level, a growl, a snap, a lunge, because that's the only thing that actually gets a response. Over time, fearful dogs learn to skip the subtle signals entirely and go straight to the explosion. Because the explosion works. The scary thing backs away. The owner reacts. The situation changes. This is why so many fearful dogs seem to react with no warning. They gave warnings for months. Nobody listened, so they stopped bothering. Short start here's what nobody tells you about a dog that seems to snap with no warning. They did warn you. They warned you dozens of times. The yawn, the lip lick, the whale eye, the low posture, those are all your dog saying, I am uncomfortable, I am scared, please make this stop. But because we do not recognize those signals, we miss them. And the dog learns that the subtle stuff doesn't work. So they skip straight to the explosion. That growl that came out of nowhere, it didn't come from nowhere. You just didn't know the language. Now let us talk about the dominance myth, because this is where a lot of well-meaning training goes completely off the rails. The dominance model, the idea that your dog is misbehaving, because they are trying to assert rank over you or claim leadership of the household, was popularized in the mid-20th century based on flawed research involving captive wolf packs. That research has since been thoroughly dismantled by the same scientist who originally conducted it. Wolves in the wild do not operate on rigid dominance hierarchies, and domestic dogs, who have been selectively bred for thousands of years specifically to cooperate with humans, do not operate that way either. But the dominance framework persists, and when it gets applied to a fearful dog, the results can be genuinely damaging. Because if you believe your dog is acting out of a desire to control or challenge you, the logical response is to assert your authority, to correct the behavior, to show the dog who's in charge. Alpha roles, physical corrections, punishment-based tools, these come directly from the dominance model. Apply those to a fearful dog, and here's what actually happens. You take an animal whose nervous system is already in a state of high alert, already convinced the world is dangerous, and you confirm that belief. You become part of the threat. The dog doesn't learn to be calm. They learn that scary situations also include the person who's supposed to keep them safe. Trust erodes. The fear deepens. The behavior gets worse. This isn't a training philosophy debate. This is neuroscience. Punishment elevates cortisol, the stress hormone. Chronically elevated cortisol literally changes the way the brain processes information, making the dog more reactive, more sensitized, more likely to respond to smaller and smaller triggers over time. You're not training the fear away. You're baking it in deeper. So what does actually work? Everything changes when you understand that your dog isn't trying to dominate you or control the situation. They're trying to survive it. And your job shifts from asserting authority to building safety. The first principle is threshold management. Every fearful dog has a threshold, the point at which the emotional intensity of a trigger pushes them into a reactive state. Below threshold, your dog can think. They can learn. They can process new information. Above threshold, the thinking brain goes offline and the survival brain takes over. When your dog is above threshold, no training is happening. They're not capable of learning in that moment. They're just trying to get through it. So the first practical step is identifying what your dog's triggers are, the specific things that activate the fear response, and creating enough distance from those triggers that your dog can stay below threshold. This isn't avoidance for the sake of avoiding. This is creating the conditions under which learning is actually possible. The second principle is counterconditioning. This is the process of changing the emotional association your dog has with a scary thing. Right now, the sight of a stranger, or the sound of a skateboard, or whatever the trigger is, it predicts something awful in your dog's emotional experience. Counterconditioning pairs that trigger with something genuinely wonderful, high-value food, a favorite toy, whatever your dog finds irresistible, at a distance where the dog can still function. Over time, the trigger stops predicting danger and starts predicting good things. The emotional response shifts. This takes time. It's not a 2-session fix. But the changes, when they happen, are real and lasting because you are working at the level of emotional association, not just behavior suppression. The third principle is desensitization, which works hand in hand with counterconditioning. Desensitization means gradually reducing the distance to the trigger over time, always staying below threshold, always making sure the dog is comfortable at the current level before moving closer. The key word is gradually. Flooding, throwing the dog into the deep end, and making them deal with it, does not work for fearful dogs. It overwhelms the nervous system and typically makes the problem significantly worse. Short start. The single biggest mistake people make with a fearful dog is trying to speed up the process. You see your dog doing well at 20 feet from a trigger, and you think, great, let us try 15. And maybe that works. So you try 10. And suddenly your dog is above threshold and reacting, and you feel like you are back to square one. You're not back to square one, but you did just teach your dog's nervous system that progress isn't safe. Slow is fast with fearful dogs. The more patience you bring to this, the faster you'll actually get there. Short end. The fourth principle, and this one is often overlooked, is building your dog's overall emotional resilience outside of trigger contexts. A dog who is chronically stressed, understimulated, or lacking in physical and mental exercise is operating with a nervous system that's already running hot. That dog has a much lower threshold, much less tolerance for anything unexpected. Regular exercise, enrichment activities, training that builds confidence through success, and genuine predictability in their daily life. All of these lower the baseline stress level. And a dog with lower baseline stress has more emotional bandwidth to handle difficult moments. Now, there's one more thing that needs to be said directly. Some dogs have fear that is severe enough that behavior modification alone isn't sufficient. If your dog's fear is significantly impacting their quality of life, if they are in a constant state of anxiety, if they are unable to function in basic situations, if the reactivity is severe and long-standing, a conversation with a veterinarian about anti-anxiety medication is not a failure. It's not taking the easy way out. Medication doesn't change behavior, but it can lower the neurological noise enough that the dog becomes capable of learning. Think of it as creating the neurological conditions for training to actually work. There's no award for doing this the hard way if your dog is suffering. Let us bring this back to the moment this video started with. Your dog lunges at a stranger, and your instinct is to label it, to fix it with force, to establish control. But now you have a different question to ask. Not, how do I stop this behavior? But, what is my dog afraid of, and how do I help them feel safe? That reframe is everything. It changes your posture on walks. It changes how you respond in the moment, not with correction but with distance and calm. It changes your training plan entirely. And maybe most importantly, it changes how you feel about your dog. Instead of seeing a problem, you start seeing an animal who is struggling and needs your help. That shift in perspective tends to make you a more patient, more consistent, more effective handler. And your dog feels that difference too. If this reframe hit home for you, the next step is to actually watch your dog this week with fresh eyes. Go back to that moment, the walk, the doorbell, the car ride, and this time, watch what happens in the 30 seconds before the reaction. Look for the lip lick, the whale eye, the low posture. You're learning a language, and your dog has been speaking it all along. The more fluent you get in reading those early signals, the more opportunities you create to step in before the explosion, and that's where real change starts to happen. If you found this useful, the video on reading dog body language covers those early stress signals in a lot more depth. It's a natural next step from here. Thanks for watching. If you loved this video, scan the QR code on the screen right now to subscribe and join the Pawsome Life family. Give your dog a belly rub for us, and we will see you in the next video.